down to the table and get into your community choice match. Sawyer Melban, a top 16 player, is in top 4 at Sacramento so far, top 16, a stellar season so far, 5th right now in terms of championship points, playing this Giratina VSTAR deck up against Richard, who is a new player, does not have a lot of major results, but as we've seen before, players like Alexander Flatos, who we saw earlier on, who haven't had lots of finishes, you can still have a strong start and cement yourself some championship points and get yourself towards that world championship goal.
Yeah, you can see the matchup here. 2 cards we've already talked about kind of leading up to this. We're going to have the Giratina VSTAR deck from Sawyer going up against Roaring Moon from Richard, the ancient Pokemon, trying to use that Professor Sada's Vitality, Dark Patch, those kinds of cards to accelerate energy and just go as fast as possible.
So as we're setting up, let's take a look at the prize cards. Few energy cards, it's a little bit awkward. Nothing too powerful for Richard, of course. You got to have 6 cards prized, but it is going to be this interesting list that plays Pokestop and the Galarian Moltres V. I mean, that's a card we haven't seen, I feel like, since V-Star Pokemon came out. That card sort of was obviously in decks like Rapid Strike Urshifu, but it's faded out for a while, and now it's found a great partner to support that Roaring Moon EX.
Now, this should be an interesting one. I would say overall, Roaring Moon struggles a bit with like pure Lost Zone decks, you know, Sableye, things like that. But, you know, we have noted the sometimes inconsistency of the Giratina version of these Lost Zone decks, so hopefully we're in for a good one here.
Well, let's get things kicked off. Round number 4, Portland Regional Championships, and an excellent start here for Sawyer. Battle VIP pass off the top can get these basic Pokemon into play. And check the deck to see what's available. And, I mean, it's a pretty big tell here. Your opponent did flip over that Morpeko, and there's really only one deck that's playing that, and it is that Roaring Moon EX.
Yeah, it's a funny little card that, like you said, only appears in this deck. Has that ability that if it has no energy attached, has no retreat cost. Does have a useful attack every once in a while. Can actually be used in this matchup to knock out something like a Comfey, and then you conserve the energy by moving it back. So it's a fun, almost like it's a pivot, but it works pretty well in this deck. Another interesting card we see here is the Ditto with Transformative Start. We'll see what Sawyer wants to do with this.
Can transform it into any Pokemon as long as it is in the active spot.
And only during your first turn.
And only during the first turn as well. Now, the big question, though, Giratina is a little bit hefty. It does have a 2 retreat cost, and using these first turns to get some flower selectings. And, I mean, grabbing this Ditto here does signal to me that Sawyer's at least got one of those pivoting cards because, as you said, can only use it in the active, can only use it on your first turn. And that means flower selecting can get fired off, cards can hit the Lost Zone, and, I mean, Sawyer did opt to go first, but I feel like in this matchup, Richard going second, I mean, that's what this Roaring Moon deck is excellent at doing, which is taking prize cards before your opponent can really understand what's going on in the game.
Yeah, I think one of the big knocks against the Roaring Moon deck is it's very linear. It's got one path to victory. It's attack as fast as possible. And when you miss an early attack, it feels like there's very little way to come back. So you really have to focus your deck on consistency, speed, attacking. And any turn you miss an attack just lowers your win percentage significantly.
Tough choice here off this first flower selecting. Mirage Gate and Colress, and it shows how strong this hand already is. Does already have Colress's Experiment, so we'll decide to throw that away to the Lost Zone, and there goes Ditto, hitting the discard pile, putting another Comfey in play. And a choice in terms of sequencing here for Sawyer, decided to hold Battle VIP Pass before playing that Comfey or using the flower selecting. How do you feel about that with how this hand is shaping out?
I guess just get more information, see which basics you want to go for. It's tricky because you have Ditto that can go get a basic, and then you have another Battle VIP pass. It really depends on what you're trying to dig for. Looks like Sawyer valued, having the flexibility in this situation. We'll see how it works out. Energy attachment was already used on the Jet Energy. So, yeah, you have to wonder what was kept over Colress's Experiment. Looks like a Mirage Gate. Yeah. But, yeah, always shocking. The first card to go in the Lost Zone is a Colress's Experiment.
Definitely a strong signal for sure. And another sort of awkward choice here. Giratina VSTAR and the Psychic Energy, and really prioritizing evolving these Giratina Vs. That 220 HP is perfect math into that Roaring Moon EX.
Yeah, we do see the big path to the peak. That's going to shut down a lot of the cards that give you speed in this Roaring Moon deck. Things like Squawkabilly, Luminion, Mew EX, Radiant Greninja all have a rule box, and they're all shut down by path to the peak. So Sawyer saying, you know what, if you want to go fast, you're going to need to find a counter to this stadium. It's just another roadblock to put in the way for your opponent.
We did see one of those Pokestop were in the prize cards, so only has the remaining 3 to try and find this out. And I'm not sure if I see that in the hand, but we'll at least get the Battle VIP pass, look through this deck, see what options are available, and even with what looks like no stadium bump, may even consider having to possibly dig. I mean, it's tough with how this hand is looking, but I mean, this is your big turn. This is how you push this aggression. I mean, as we've seen, whether it's with Abyss Seeking or just giving this Giratina deck time, once they hit those cards in the Lost Zone, once they evolve up, sometimes it's just too big of a mountain to climb back from.
Yeah, so you can see Richard just kind of looking to see what's in the prize cards here, looking through all the different Pokemon in the deck. And we'll see which 2 he'll take off this Battle VIP pass. Yeah. The first question will be, does he have a way to get rid of the Path to the Peak? Radiant Greninja is important to get energy into the discard pile so that you can use that Professor Sada's Vitality or Dark Patch, things like that, and also draw extra cards. Your Squawkabilly EX, the Squawk and Seize, is really crucial to get you through that first, set of new cards to really get yourself going. And it looks like that's going to be the choice, Squawkabilly and Roaring Moon EX. And it looked like Richard may have had some trekking shoes in the hand, so we may be seeing a very important top card of the deck here right away.
Risk reward of this matchup specifically, Squawkabilly only having 160 HP. It's a pretty low number to deal with. Here we go, big trekking shoes. What is this card? It is a keep. All right, second shoes, show me what we got here.
Keep running.
Deciding what this card is. I mean, I feel like if it's not a stadium card, you kind of just get rid of it. But no, instead, just going to use this Earthen Vessel, find these energies out. And I did see a Salda in the hand, so that is a potential to power this Pokemon up.
I mean, it's not your ideal thing you would find. Of course, Pokestop would be the best thing, but that may be a decision where you say, okay, this at least gets me to draw 3 more cards. And then maybe I hit the Pokestop, maybe I hit something else. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable choice. Just say, this isn't ideally what I would want, but I'm not going to get too greedy. I would like to do something this turn.
So we do see the second Roaring Moon come down. There is only 1 energy in the discard pile. Now, of course, that Morpeko can retreat for free thanks to that ability. And the question here, how do you want to play this out? Now, that free retreat only happens if there are no energy cards attached to Morpeko, so if you really want to, you could get an extra energy accelerated, but is it really worth it at that point?
That seems like a waste, yeah. I mean, yeah, you could just attach that wherever you're going to Sada it too. So, yeah, we'll see just the 1 energy for this and a crucial 3 cards. Okay. Does find the energy switch, which will allow for a turn 1 attack with the Morpeko. So it's not the ideal turn 1 start, but you got an attack off. That's really what you're trying to do with this deck. Attack, attack, attack. Every turn, try to take prize cards. You are racing your opponent every game. You don't have fancy comeback plans with this deck. It is pure aggression. So that was a big hit for Richard.
And also finding the Ultra Ball can get more of these dark energy into the discard pile. So if there's another Sada the following turn, that can power up more of these Pokemon. Now, the choice here is, how do you want to fill your bench up? Thinking about Radiant Greninja, there is that Galarian Moltres, can always bring energy back with that Dire Flame Wings ability, pending Path to the Peak is not in play. But it is also a great target for that Forest Seal Stone to just give you a little extra consistency.
So not as fast of a start as you would hope for, but again, the attack is the important part. We see the energy switch, a classic card that's been around for ages. And that's going to allow, in conjunction with the Professor Sada's Vitality, accelerated 1, switch it to the active, attach, and there we go. Morpeko on the wheel for the knockout and gets to conserve the energy, setting up for a Roaring Moon attack on the next turn.
Sorry, does have 2 cards in the Lost Zone. Great start there. Culver's Experiment, 5 cards, and these are pretty awkward cards. I mean, you kind of want to keep most of these. I guess the switch card and Nest Ball seem like the best choices, but I mean, what else do you necessarily want? Even considering maybe getting rid of one of these Mirage Gate, because that Psychic Energy did hit the Lost Zone on that first turn, and that will be the choice here for Sawyer. Getting rid of one of those Mirage Gates, did value taking that over the Colress the first turn, but I mean, you've got 4 cards in the Lost Zone now. You can use this flower selecting instantly, just saying, yep, Battle VIP Pass is not playable. I'm throwing that away. But, I mean, what is your attacker of choice? How do you plan this turn out? And how do you plan the following turn if there's going to be a big Roaring Moon powered up?
Yeah, and one of the awkward things is you have to assume, if you're Sawyer, that your opponent will not put down another single prize Pokemon. If you knock out this Morpeko, it doesn't really advance your win condition at all. You're still going to have to knock out 3 Pokemon that give up multiple prize cards. So then it becomes a question of, do I even bother? You know, if your only attack you can do this turn is like a Cramorant knockout on the active, is that even worth doing? Or should you just leave it there? It's a tricky situation. So we'll see what Sawyer decides to go with and what Sawyer has options for on this turn. As we see more and more flower selecting, we're going to get to that magic 7 cards in the Lost Zone after this one. And then things should kick into high gear from here.
I mean, the main problem is if you leave this Morpeko in the active, then what stops Richard from just doing it again, right?
Sure,
Not
yeah.
putting a 2-prize Pokemon up. But of course, these bench Pokemon can be brought into the active via the multiple gusting cards in Sawyer's deck, the Boss's Orders, and the Counter Catcher.
Yep. Yeah, even an Escape Rope would
That would
force
work,
a 2-prize Pokemon into the active.
So we'll see Nest Ball before this flower selecting. We'll bench Sableye, so the signals probably won't be seeing an attack, but this flower selecting will put Sawyer up to 7 cards in the Lost Zone, turning on Mirage Gate. Speaking of which, another tough choice. Mirage Gate and Jet Energy, both cards you want, especially with Sawyer having 3 energy cards in the prizes. How do you go about valuing these 2 cards?
I don't know if you can afford to get rid of a second Mirage
Oh, it's
Gate
a
here.
boss, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's still a card that, of course, you want. Of course, if this Morpeko just attacks again, you want to have Gust. But Jet Energy is another great way to draw more cards, continue your acceleration, provide some consistency. So,
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see anything here. Already filled the bench, so no Cramorant. No, again, probably no point knocking out the Morpeko, and now it's on to Richard to see what's going to happen this turn. Yeah, like you mentioned, if the Morpeko can get powered up again, we could just see another knockout from that and force another awkward situation, but does require another energy switch. So we'll see what happens.
great way to start off. Sada drawing 3 cards, does find the Pokestop and a second cross switcher. And now Richard has a few choices with how he wants to go about this turn. But listen, a nice juicy 2-prize knockout, that's no bad way to get your second turn going.
Yeah, this is looking pretty good for Richard at the moment. Looks like we'll get out to a pretty sizable lead. But, I mean, leads only last so long sometimes. We see the Pokestop getting rid of a Boss's Orders, does find the switch cart. Not the best.
Yeah, Boss is, of course, a card you'd like to have later on in the game, but I mean, another choice here for Sora. I don't know how many Giratina VSTAR were in the hand, but by not evolving those, the only way you can take a one-hit knockout on that Giratina VSTAR is to use that Frenzied Gouging to take the knockout. Otherwise, now Calamity Storm can just take knockouts, and you're not putting yourself in that range where something like Sableye can finish you off with Lost Mine.
Yeah, whenever you can use Calamity Storm instead of Frenzied Gouging, it's a huge win. You don't put your Pokemon in danger. So, yeah. Giratina V having exactly 220 HP. That is a factor here, especially with the double cross switcher. Looks like Richard's going to be able to play the entire hand down as a Dark Patch, and then has Mew EX to restart up to 3 cards. Hey, this turn's pretty good.
Could even play the Mew EX down before pivoting, but already knows what Pokemon he wants to go after. Double cross switcher, bringing up Giratina V. And, I mean, Mew EX, yes, it's great for restart, but it does also have that genome hack.
That's
and
true.
That's a great attack against Giratina V-Star as well.
Yeah, it is awkward to power up, but with enough energy switches, you can do it.
Haven't seen an energy commitment for turn yet. There are no dark energy in the discard pile. So, I mean, the choice here is, how do you want to put these energies? I mean, you could prep it on Mew, but I mean, Richard's about to enter that scary zone now where once you go to 3 prize cards, you might have to expect a Roxanne incoming.
Exactly, yeah. You're just trying to prepare as best you can, power up as many attackers as you can. And this is where the Roaring Moon deck is vulnerable. You can power up a couple attackers, but you are kind of vulnerable to Path to the Peak plus hand disruption, and that is in an easy way that a Giratina V-Star deck can come back.
So how will Sawyer respond here? 3 prizes already taken. This Giratina V-Star seems like the only hope in terms of clawing this matchup back, but I mean, it's staring a return knockout right away. Sawyer has yet to take any prize cards, put any damage on the board, and there's already a second Roaring Moon powered up. We'll still use these Mirage Gates, grab the energy cards out of the deck, and maybe put some energy onto something like the Comfey. That will give it free retreat out of the active at some point. And yes, this attack is here, this knockout is present, but I mean, what is your next step after this? Or what is your next step this turn to try and put Richard on the back foot? And yeah, I mean, you're going to stare down this knockout from the bench Roaring Moon, but is there a way for you to put a little bit more in terms of attacking pressure so that Richard can't respond?
Yeah, and the question is, do you need to get another Giratina V down this turn? You have to expect your Giratina V-Star is going to get knocked out in return. And then, sure, you could follow up with like a Sableye after that, but then it's a very easy knockout for anything like Galarian Moltres V, even Morpeko can like get a last knockout somewhere. So yeah, got to put down another Giratina V. You got to expect to power up 2 Giratina V-Star this game. We do see the Iono, which, I mean, is huge hand disruption here, but has to be paired with a Path to the Peak. Otherwise, that Mew EX will provide Richard with some extra cards.
Speaking of which, Path to the Peak right there in the hand for Sawyer.
Okay.
We'll play that down, bringing this Giratina up, and there's no Star Requiem necessarily, but I mean, this is what you need to sort of slowly rally back. You shut off the restart ability from you shut off Dire Flame Wings from the Galarian Moltres V. Will be Lost Impact, taking a knockout on Roaring Moon. How did Richard draw into these 3 cards? Can he power up yet another attacker to keep his aggression going in this game 1?
Yeah, so some interesting, oh, well, that's a good one. Drawing the Professor Sada's Vitality. Does have double cross switcher. It's a little awkward to use. I think you would want to knock out the active if you can. Reason being, Sawyer has already gone through, there's 2 Mirage Gate in the discard, 1 in the Lost Zone, and to power up that Giratina V-Star on the following turn, you would need to find the 4th Mirage Gate. So it would force your opponent to find that if you just attack into the active. Some good cards off of this. You know, find the energy switch. I don't think there's a stadium, though. So still going to be a little bit awkward in the coming turns.
Yeah, I think the choice here is how do you want to power up this last attacker? We are going to see the energy switch, but I don't. Now there are the dark energy in the discard pile. That Roaring Moon did get knocked out. Now one thing that's sort of in my mind is, I mean, if you have this Roaring Moon powered up like this, I mean, I guess your best bet is to bring the Giratina V up regardless. But like you said, with those Mirage Gates down, with those energies still being in the prize cards, let alone if Sawyer could keep up and take this knockout, can he do that with the energies and resources left in his deck?
Yeah, and this is good too. I mean, you can use the Calamity Storm, get a knockout, and it gets rid of the Path to the Peak. So force your opponent to get another Path to the Peak. All you really need is 1 more energy, and you can just Frenzied Gouging for the game. So this makes sense as well. Just make it so that all you need to win is an energy, and this doesn't open you up to any like Sableye plays where your opponent could like counter catcher out the Galarian Moltres V, like Roxanne, and then start to pick away at your bench. You don't put damage on your own Pokemon. So, hey, great play from Richard. This has been a flawless game plan so far, and he just needs to attack 1 more time and he'll win the game.
What can Sawyer do to disrupt at this point? We'll play the Super Rod, so this will put the energy cards back into the deck to maybe power up this Giratina V-Star. Now, there are 10 cards in the Lost Zone, so no need to play Colress this turn. Can Star Requiem and not have to pitch any more of those precious energy cards in the Lost Zone. But like you said, with that Roaring Moon on the bench, 1 energy card of any type will be enough to just knock out whatever's in the active spot and give Richard a 1-0 lead in this set.
All right. Yeah, feels like Sawyer's going to have to find that last path, or 1 more Path to the Peak. That's a tough decision off of the flower selecting. I saw the last Mirage Gate in there. What else is...
And only plays 1 copy of that counter catcher. So
by
putting that away, I feel like Sawyer understands that there's maybe got to be some sort of stranding strategy or potentially bringing something back up. And I mean, by keeping the counter catcher Escape Rope can allow you to look at one more card, and then it doesn't really matter what your opponent brings up. You can just choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, bring it back up, but still looking for that energy card to power up this Giratina V-Star, and it's not quite there. Has to put away the Roxanne, and is going to play yet another switching card to continue to dig through this deck. Is there a Grass Energy? Still no.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier there are a lot of energy in the prize cards. One of them was a Grass Energy. It looks like Sableye just going to be the choice here. Counter Catcher out the Moltres. Okay, there's a Roxanne to go with it. So if you draw a Path to the Peak, I mean, there is a chance that this gets stranded for a while.
Does have a 2 retreat cost. Now with no stadium play, it essentially just acts as a 1 retreat cost though, right? Because you can use that ability, put an energy card on it.
Yeah, that's why you need that Path to the Peak. You need to take away that Dire Flame Wings ability. Also take away Mew EX's restart. If you don't draw a Path to the Peak here, I think you pretty much know the game's over.
A tough spot indeed. Richard will draw 2 cards off this Roxanne. Sawyer, 6 cards. What do we see at this point? And there's nothing. No Grass Energy, no Psychic Energy. We talked about stranding something. What good is stranding a Pokemon if you can't even attack your opponent's board?
Yeah, I mean, you can't give your opponent much time here. They don't need very much to just retreat and win.
Especially if there's no Path to the Peak. Sawyer is running those max 4 copies to try and disrupt some of these ability-heavy decks. And, I mean, you can play... I mean, there is still concealed cards, so you can play that, and still no energy cards. Sableye's just going to pass the turn over, and...
Dejected, go ahead.
And we see it. Water Energy is in hand, so, I mean...
That should be it, right?
Yeah.
You just use Dire Flame Wings, put one on the Moltres. Yeah, you attach, retreat, say any attack, and you win the game, right?
Is there a chance that Richard doesn't necessarily see that at this place? I mean,
does he know?
Does he know? Oh, this is sort of, that's right there, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, Sada's great, but...
Yeah, I think he's preparing for Mew EX to restart into some cards. I think at some point he'll probably realize, oh, right, I'm just going to win. But we'll go through the motions here. And, yeah, I have to assume this is going to end with Richard taking the final knockout, taking a 1-0 lead with Roaring Moon firing on all cylinders.
Playing the pal pad for good measure, and yeah.
Yep.
Sawyer understands that Richard has what it takes to close out this first game, and in pretty convincing fashion. I mean, sure, Sawyer didn't find those necessary pieces, but those cross switchers coming in clutch to maximize those damages. And we didn't even see Frenzied Gouging, which is such a powerful attack, but a huge cost, especially against these Lost Zone decks.
Yeah, Cross Switcher is really good when you draw them in pairs all the time, and that's exactly what Richard did twice. He's just like, oh, I'll just draw 2 of them. It's really good.
Feels like Puzzle of Time all over again, right? Just, yeah, let me draw my 3 cards. Oh.
Yeah, or the Custom Catcher.
Of course, yeah, these 2 cards. There is no way to bring back the supporter cards from your discard pile that's not in this list. But speaking of this list, Cross Receiver, yeah. This was all Richard, though, in the first game. Sawyer, unable to really get these Giratina V-Stars powered up, and when you don't evolve both of them super quick, we just see this deck just run away with it. Early aggression, putting on pressure, not finding Path to the Peak late, or those important attacks with things like Sableye or Giratina, and Richard took a pretty convincing game number 1 here in round 4.
And I would say probably the MVP of that first game was the Morpeko. I mean, giving Richard an option to attack turn 1, a single prize Pokemon, that was the difference maker. I mean, if that card's not in his deck, I think that game could look completely different. So having that 1 prize Pokemon, even a small little attack for 70 damage, was a huge difference maker.
You see one of those Path to the Peak in the prize cards. Nothing too detrimental. I think we're going to have a great second game here, Kyle, as it will actually be Richard starting things off in this matchup going first. And that could have actually just been a choice by Sawyer, potentially, to just say, look, I know your deck wants to go second. I know your deck wants to attack on the first turn. Let me put you in a situation where you might have a little bit of a more difficult time setting up, and at least I can draw some more cards, maybe with something like Abyss Seeking. But just going to go ahead and trash the hand away, getting rid of some of those important resources like the Pal Pad, like the Cross Switcher, but more than happy to get some energy cards in the discard pile, and not too bad of a hand here. You do have that Pokestop, and this is a great turn to want to play Battle Pass, but you've also got to wonder, is it worth that reward when your opponent is playing those powerful counter stadium cards like Path to the Peak?
Oh, well.
Never mind, Kyle. It was worth it.
I was going to say Richard's hand looked pretty bad, so I think you definitely have to go for the Pokestop there. Like, there was nothing set up for the next turn. So you just got to hope for the best with the Pokestop, and hey, sometimes you spin it and Battle VIP passes come out.
Spin to win, right? That's all you got to do. Great 2 cards, and also got rid of another Dark Energy card.
Yep.
So if Richard wants to, could grab that Galarian Moltres V. Now, it is a little bit less appealing to have on the board because you did have to get rid of that 4 Sealstone, the 1 copy with that Squawk and Seize, but with playing so many copies of Energy Switch, the max 4 copies, it essentially almost acts as a built-in Dark Patch every turn if you can use that ability.
Yep. I'm curious, what do you think about Sawyer's decision? I assume went second in this game. You know, there's always questions, which matchup should you go first? Which one should you go second? I'm assuming Sawyer chose to go second here. What do you think about that in this matchup?
I mean, with how Roaring Moon can pop off, it really does depend, because at its max, you could see a full Roaring Moon powered up, cross-switcher to bring up Giratina, and then at that point, your opponent's only got 2 cards in the Lost Zone, so what are they really doing? I think with Sawyer at this point, if you can play Colress, if you can Flower Selecting, and then maybe use something like Abyss Seeking, understanding that your opponent's most likely going to take a 2-prize knockout, whether you want to or not, responding right away when your opponent's at those 4 prize cards, that's got to be priority number 1, so we'll see how things pan out, but it also does depend on how your hand looks, because there are hands that are really great going first, and there are some hands that you've got Colress's Experiment, but no way to really dig through the deck, so it will be on those 6 cards, 7 cards with the top deck for Sawyer, as Richard does have the Galarian Moltres as the selection, did use the concealed cards to draw a few cards, and did find a Professor Sada for the following turn, as we will just be seeing what looks like potentially just debating what to get here. It will actually just be another Pokemon coming down into play, and that MVP from Game 1, Morpeko, coming back onto the field.
Yeah, it is a bit more awkward when you have 2 single-prize Pokemon in play. We'll see if that makes any difference at all. But, yeah, giving your opponent access to 2 one-prize things to knock out is obviously much weaker than just having the 1 and then forcing your opponent to go all 2-prize Pokemon for the entirety of the game. Yeah, the question for me in the matchup, and I'm not sure what's correct and what's not, is if you're playing a deck with 4 Paths to the Peak, you know how devastating it can be if your opponent doesn't find a counter stadium. Maybe there's some argument for going first when you can play down the Path to the Peak and maybe stop them from setting up at all. Well, it looks like Sawyer valued being able to go second, maybe get the first attack, play a Colress's Experiment right away. We'll see if it works out, but this hand is looking dreadful. But did go into the Colress's Experiment, so things are looking up maybe.
Now, choice time here for Sawyer. Not only how do you want to select these cards, but more importantly, how do you want to end your turn? Because there is the potential to end the turn off with something like the Abyss Seeking. You could also put a Pokemon into the active that isn't knocked out by Morpeko. I mean, when you're in this position where you're going second, your opponent's very clearly threatening a knockout the following turn. How do you sort of navigate your board, and more importantly, what Pokemon do you leave in play to try and sort of prevent as much risk as possible?
Yeah, and how deep do you want to go getting cards into your Lost Zone? You would love to use Abyss Seeking and get more cards in your Lost Zone, but yeah, then you leave a 2-prize Pokemon in the active, easily knocked out. I think that's too much of a risk. I think you need to have a single-prize Pokemon in the active. This might be a spot where Cramorant is a good idea. Get that 1-prize knockout, since the Radiant Greninja is potentially one that can be picked off later. You can set up some kind of play with Moonlight Shuriken, then a Sableye to clean some stuff up later. So I think ideally you would go for Cramorant here. My question is, will Sawyer spin the Pokestop? We have not seen that yet.
It's a deadly trap. It's right in front of you there.
Yeah.
Your opponent's sort of like, go ahead and use this Pokestop. But it is really that risk factor. There's not any ways to bring back supporter cards if you get rid of those. You really want to use these Super Rods conservatively. You don't want to get rid of those Pokemon. But like you said, in this position, how much do you balance that sort of getting greedy and trying to draw cards, with also making sure that you're being a little bit conservative in terms of how aggressive you're pushing yourself?
Yep, so let's see what Sawyer cooks up next. We got to switch cart into a Flower Selecting. Still only 2 cards in the Lost Zone. Haven't been able to find a Battle VIP pass. And, oh no, here it comes. I think we're heading into the abyss.
2 more cards will hit the lost zone. We'll bring Sawyer up to 5. These are some pretty solid cards. Does find the Giratina V for the next turn to put another one into play if Sawyer chooses to do that. Even considering just keeping something like the Super Rod, giving that a little bit more value. But, I mean, the Stadium card's in play. Pokestop is there. You've got a pivot into the active spot. I mean, you've got to really ask yourself, I mean, maybe Sawyer doesn't have a choice at this point, but it's 2 prize cards for essentially 2 more cards in the Lost Zone, and will that be a winning trade for Sawyer in this game?
Yep, so big turn here for Richard. Starts the turn with just 1 energy in play on that Galarian Moltres V, but kicks things off with Professor Sada's Vitality, a really strong supporter card. Get to choose 2 of your ancient Pokemon in play, attach an energy card from your discard pile to both of them, and then draw 3 cards. Kind of gives you flashback to Welder in a much different way, but very powerful energy acceleration. And will we see a Roaring Moon EX get powered up for that Calamity Storm and just storm in for 2 prize cards?
This is tough, though. No energy switch or dark patch in this hand as it is, and Pokestop is still available, so that's still the option.
Here we go.
Let's spin the wheel, Kyle. Let's see what we've got here. There's the energy card and a trekking shoes as well. So, I mean, that hits 2 of the 3 conditions that we need to hit at this point. There has been no attachment yet for turn. And
thin some cards out with the Earthen Vessel.
Yeah, look at that, though. So many outs in the deck. All those dark patch still available. 4 of them in the deck. You've got 3 energy switch still.
Yep.
I mean, the odds are pretty much in Richard's favor here to take another 2 prize knockout, push the aggression, and yeah, this is where we sort of see this matchup can be tough on both sides, but once there's one breakthrough, it's really trying to play this catch-up game with Roaring Moon that makes it so tough to battle against.
Yep. And we do have 2 sets of the trekking shoes. So first one, gonna throw away an Earthen Vessel, does not hit. Here's the second one. Uh-oh, last card.
Finds it.
Oh.
Wow.
All right, there is the dark patch. Will allow Richard to power up the Roaring Moon EX. Dug 4 cards with those 2 trekking shoes, and the 4th card was the one that Richard needed to pull off this big attack and start things off once again as the aggressor in this matchup.
Can also use Dire Flame Wings to put this dark energy onto the Galarian Moltres V. That's a potential attacker down the line. It's also something that can't be trapped. You just have energy in play when you've still got all of these energy switch available. And an excellent turn there for Richard, piloting it through, maximizing those outs and getting rewarded, finding that dark patch. Calamity Storm, 220 damage, knocking out this Giratina V. Richard off to the races again in game 2, and will Sawyer be able to catch up?
Yeah, it's tough. We are going to get to 7 cards in the Lost Zone right away with the Course's Experiment. And then you just got to hope, Mirage Gate, Giratina VSTAR, get a knockout, go from there. Yeah, this is where things turn into a race. And you just got to hope to be able to keep up with your Giratina VSTAR.
Speaking of which, I'm not sure if Sawyer has found that card yet. And of course, you're going to need that to attack so far. Will, now with 7 cards in the Lost Zone, use this Mirage Gate. Get the energy cards into play onto Giratina. Right now, only has that 1 Comfey. We do see 2 in the Lost Zone, so there's not sort of that potential we saw when Sawyer had 3 of those out to sort of just keep digging and using those switch cards to try and find more of these crucial cards. The supporter card already being played. I mean, you've got this concealed cards on the bench, you've got this flower selecting, but besides that, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever those top 4 cards are looking like on your deck.
Yeah, this will be a big one. Still have Radiant Greninja to use as well, so we'll be able to dig quite a bit here. One interesting thing, I think this is a situation where you do not bench another Giratina V. You want to get the 1 Giratina VSTAR out this turn, and then the only way your opponent can knock out your Giratina VSTAR is with Frenzied Gouging, which then puts it in range for things like Sableye to Lost Mine and finish off the Roaring Moon EX. I don't think you want to put another Giratina V down here because then it gives Richard the opportunity to do the same thing that happened last game. Bring out the Giratina V on the bench, knock it out. Don't put the damage on yourself with Frenzied Gouging.
And look at this, in like a 10-card hand, there's still no Giratina VSTAR. Use the concealed cards, use the flower selecting. We'll have 1 more option to use potentially another switching card, like a switch card to look at these top 2 cards. And if there's no Giratina V-Star, I mean, that feels like the story of this match for Sawyer. Just bad break after bad break, missing attacks, not finding pieces, and I mean,
yeah, none of this matters. None of this matters if you don't find Giratina V-Star.
And then at that point, that's where we're talking about this train run in the way. There's really no coming back from that. There is a switch card in hand, so can play the switch card, and then there hasn't been an attachment for turns, so we could see sort of the jet energy come into play to bring this Giratina V back up. But
one more shot
here
at
we go.
it.
2 big cards here. Do we see Giratina V-Star? No, misses the Giratina V-Star. And with what's in hand, you can't use Sableye. You've only got 9 cards in the lost zone. You've already played your supporter card for turn. I mean, what, do you shred with this Giratina? I mean, that's just feeding your opponent the 2 prizes. But Cramorant, I just don't know if that's going to cut it at this position for Sawyer, especially if Richard can bring up this Giratina V. How are you putting enough damage to take these last couple of prize cards?
Yeah, I mean, you got to try. Can attack with the Cramorant, try to get some damage on the board. Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, things didn't pan out, and this is what we talk about with Giratina V-Star sometimes. It's great in theory when everything works, super strong, lots of one-hit knockouts, but sometimes, you know, you don't find the V-Star, you don't find the Mirage Gate, you don't find the whatever, and your game plan does not go off as you expected. And that is what we're seeing here. Now, it's still not over. Richard still has some work to do,
but has double cross switcher in hand, and that is a huge 2 cards to find. That already seals up the knockout, even has the Pokestop to spin the wheel, find some more of those item cards. And this is absolutely incredible here for Richard. Finds Dark Patch, more stadium cards. Is just flexing at this point with how great he can build his board up.
Okay, Richard doesn't have much more work to do at this point.
Just seeing how many energy cards are still available now. There is a water energy, but that can't be brought back unless there's something like the Sada to power it up. I mean, there's no reason to not play that. You might as well power up the second Roaring Moon. And
I mean, it's 2 water energy, so it actually can't attack.
That's true.
One thing to keep in mind, this deck does play many energy switches, and you can power up Radiant Greninja, and Moonlight Shuriken here would also be devastating. Knock out 2 Comfey, take 2 prize cards. You got to think that would pretty much be game over.
Either or, plenty of options for Richard to select how he wants to play this turn out. Still hasn't even put an energy card into play yet for the turn.
Yep.
Will power up the second Roaring Moon, and I think we're just going to see it, Kyle.
Yeah, Sawyer's like picking up the Giratina V, like, okay, yeah.
Double cross switcher.
Yep.
Devastating for Sawyer, taking that huge threat off the board. Richard will go down to 2 prize cards yet with no damage on his board. And what can Sawyer put together to keep his hopes alive here to stay undefeated? Gonna even spin the Pokestop for more measure. I mean, does get rid of a few cards there. I mean, you kind of want to see those maybe off of something like a Roxanne, the Counter Stadium, the Professor Sada, but I mean, what more could you ask for here? Another 2 prize knockout, another big threat on Sawyer's board, going to the discard pile. Now Sawyer's in the tank. How do you get out of this predicament?
Yeah. Be honest, not sure. It's going to have to be some, you know, cross your fingers kind of play at this point. You know, you counter catcher out the Squawkabilly, play a Roxanne, lost mine a few times. Hope your opponent never finds a way to move the Squawkabilly, that kind of thing.
I think that's the only option you've got at this point. We'll see the lost mine potentially online now. There is 9 cards, but with the flower selecting, that will bring Sawyer up to 10. We'll use the Mirage Gate first, putting the Psychic Energy on the Sableye, so that will be all powered up to go. And I mean, that's never a great strategy, cross your fingers and hope, but sometimes that's Giratina's best strategy late in the game is say, look, you played a lot of cards, you've got a lot of cards, you've still got Battle VIP Pass in your deck, right? How about you draw into all 4 of those for me, so I can maybe get a few bonus turns to myself.
Just milled some good cards with your own Pokestop. Yeah.
This will bring Sawyer up to 10. Easy choice there. Magic number achieved, and another Battle VIP Pass going out into the Lost Zone. And the choice here for Sawyer, do you want to play Roxanne or do you want to play Iono in this position? This is one where, I mean, with still 6 prizes remaining, I gotta feel like Iono is just probably the better option, but You never know what your opponent necessarily has in their hand. Those cards do go to the bottom, rather than everything being shuffled back in like it will be with this Roxanne, which will be the supporter of choice here for Sawyer.
Yep, did see the counter catcher for the Squawkabilly. It's really your only boy out at this point. It's the only thing that cannot currently retreat. Everything else on board had a way to retreat. So you know when you do this, your odds are not great, but at least it gives you a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance, Kyle?
There is, yeah. I mean, Richard could draw every unplayable card left in his deck. Or, you know, I mean, the odds were high to find a way to retreat.
Yeah,
but
it's true. So Sawyer will still play this turn out, of course. No knowledge on what Richard has. Drawn some more cards with the Lost Zone.
And it's not over, right? Richard needs to take 2 prize cards. So
that's true.
Even if Richard retreats once and gets a knockout, you could run the same play back where you get like boss's orders, bring the Squawkabilly back out. You know, maybe you didn't find a way to retreat the second time.
Yeah, I think Sawyer maybe would have wanted to find something like a Giratina VSTAR to put, or Giratina V to maybe put back into play, but it's sort of that risk reward, right? You give yourself, your opponent, that option to win the game, but I mean, if they've got to get through a 2-prize Pokemon, Sableye setting some Lost Mine math up, but there's no sudden death risk because you haven't taken any prize cards left, so it's just a tough spot for Sawyer. Regardless, we'll still play it out. Lost Mine can take the knockout onto the Roaring Moon if Sawyer chooses to.
Yeah, it depends on what you want to go for. Do you just want to spread a bunch of damage and
it's tough.
Leave the bench locked? That way you don't give your opponent an out to draw Mew EX or Lumineon V. I don't think it makes a huge difference for you to take the knockout on this turn, so maybe you just spread some damage around, but it's like gonna leave it with 10 HP, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the fact that you missed the path to the peak, there's no reason to give yourself an extra out, right? Your win condition is limiting your opponent's good draws to give yourself a win in this game, so. You could also just put some damage counters on that Roaring Moon, so if it ever does use Frenzy Gouging, it would knock itself out, but just insult to injury there. Another energy switch can put the energy on the Squawkabilly. That can retreat.
Yeah.
You can even put the energy that you just discarded to retreat back on the Galarian Moltres for the following turn. Everything going perfectly here for Richard in Game 2.
Yep, so we should see a retreat into one of those Roaring Moon EX. And the Dire Flame Wings, like you said, will get the energy right back onto the Galarian Moltres V. You could argue that it's worth keeping in the discard pile. If you don't have any energy in your discard, then Professor Sada's Vitality would be an out to draw something. But at this point, you got to assume an energy switch, one that's in the hand already, will be enough to close out the game.
Sawyer, you have to take any prize cards. Is there a way to still rally back in this game? Does have another Sableye. Do see Super Rod in the hand. Does find that boss's orders.
Yep.
And this is sort of the problem. You can't disrupt your opponent's hand and bring a Pokemon into the active at the same turn. Sawyer does not have that understanding of not only the energy switch being in hand, but I mean, that's kind of all you have to do at this point. I don't even know if there's a way to Lost Mine at this point. You've got to find a way to not only pivot this Comfey out, but also power the Sableye up. And with how many Mirage Gates have already been played, maybe only one remaining. And I don't even think there's much going on in this hand whatsoever.
Yep, just an unfortunate sequence of events for Sawyer. For Richard, life's pretty good. Got a quick attack off both games. Never really lost any momentum. Yep. And there we see the energy switch. And that will be it. Richard takes a decisive 2-0 victory. Roaring Moon EX at 4-0. Look at that.